So the AstraZeneca vaccine is now licensed and has been distributed to something like 171 countries, and many millions of people have had it, and it has saved almost certainly tens of thousands of lives. So that I don't think we could be in a better position in that regard with the AstraZeneca vaccine. The technologies that underlie these vaccines are quite new, some of them. I think that's going to pave the way to new vaccines for other diseases in the future as well. We're now over a year into these vaccines, and actually they're holding out really extraordinarily well. And although now, of course, the government has released restrictions, we're going to see how well they hold up and whether or not the virus mutates significantly under that sort of vaccine pressure. Yeah, I think the pace of change and the efficacy of the vaccines is extraordinary and better than we could have dreamt of last year. There was a lot of concern back in August that the vaccines might not be durable and that the responses might wear out over time. And we haven't actually seen that much of that. All antibody responses do decrease over time, but most people who are vaccinated are protected from severe disease and death, which is the main aim of the vaccines. It is likely that we're going to need to give booster vaccines, particularly to those people who maybe don't raise such strong immune responses. So the concern around boosters is really twofold. So one is whether or not the vaccine just sort of wears off, that you might be able to give the original vaccine as a booster dose and then bump the antibody levels up high enough that they can deal with all variants of the virus. The second type of vaccine would be to actually address those new variants, to redesign the vaccine based on those new variants. There are trials ongoing to do both, and so we're running one of those trials. It's called COV Boost at the moment in Glasgow. It doesn't matter that much which one you get. That's what we would hope for, that they're all immunogenic or that they all result in a strong immune response, and that it doesn't really matter what your third dose is as long as it triggers a strong immune response. COG-UK has been a game changer in terms of the way that we deal with virus outbreaks in the UK. And I think that it set the pace actually internationally as well. And the UK has been seen as being one of the clearest front runners in terms of using genomic sequencing to help us to understand how SARS-CoV-2 behaves and how the virus transmits. And then, of course, with the emergence of new variants, so I think probably COG-UK is going to be best well remembered for the fact that the first new variant was identified through that consortium, and that was the Kent variant, or the Alpha variant, which was identified in the southeast of England. And so I think some of the lessons that we've learned and that I've been involved with have been, for example, looking at travel-related importations of the virus. So that's certainly been used by the government as evidence for being more careful about travel-related restrictions and quarantine and that sort of thing. But I do think the most important issue is around the way the virus is changing. The fact that we're using that to understand whether or not the virus will respond to vaccines and will continue to respond to vaccines. The design of new vaccines is something that COG-UK will be feeding directly into. And our project that's just been funded, that will be a continuation of COG-UK, is to monitor the way that vaccines work against these new variants and to evaluate how well the vaccines are working against the new variants. Perhaps the other huge achievement of COG-UK, I think, is to bring together virologists from across the whole country and to help us to work together really productively and openly. And I think that this will lead to the consortium moving forward into advising on how to sequence other viruses, for example. We see that as being one of the legacies of COG-UK, will be that we work more internationally, and we are linked with various countries to assist, if that's required, with genomics training. I would really hope that in the next sort of 10 to 20 years that we would see the emergence of vaccination being produced in sub-Saharan Africa, rather than having to be imported from countries in Europe and in North America, because I think that we do have a responsibility as well to share vaccines. It's in all of our interests. Of course, it's not even just in the interest of these people in other countries, it's in our interest as well, because if you leave the virus to incubate and transmit, then you get the formation of newer variants, and those new variants may compromise our vaccines. We can't think of ourselves in terms of sort of national boundaries anymore, because viruses don't respect them. So we need to get better at sharing vaccines, medicines and capacities across the world. I think perhaps number two is that we maintain the incredible relationships that have developed between people and researchers, both in the UK but also internationally. I think that I'd like to see an increased sort of responsibility at a global level for how we're looking after the planet, because otherwise we're really heading for some very difficult times, both in terms of importation of viruses. These viruses are increasing and these importations are increasing because of the way in which we're behaving across the world. And so I think that we need to rely on strengthening international organizations that help to prevent these things from happening. So I think the UN and WHO need to be strengthened. You know, we're looking down maybe one generation now to serious problems on a scale that we haven't seen before.